with my mother, I used to fold the sheets and pull them two ways, down the side and across. So I'm sure many of you know the game of X and O's was the same kind. You have to get your O's or X's in a line down or across. T.S. Eliot had to put notes at the wasteland, but I don't think we require that on X's and O's. The cool that came off sheets just off the line made me think the damp must still be in them. But when I took my corners of the linen and pulled against her, first straight down the hem and then diagonally, then flapped and shook the fabric like a sail in a crosswind, they made a dried out, undulating thwack. So we'd stretch and fold and end up hand to hand for a split second, as if nothing had happened. For nothing that had not always happened beforehand, day by day, just touch and go, coming close again by holding back, in moves where I was X and she was O, inscribed in sheets sewn from ripped out flour sacks. I thought of walking round and round a space, utterly empty, utterly a source, where the decked chestnut tree had lost its place in our front hedge above the wallflowers. The white chips jumped and skited high. I heard the hatchet's differentiated, accurate cut, the crack, the sigh and collapse of what luxuriated through the shocked tips and wreckage of it all. Deep planted and long gone, my coeval chestnut from a jam jar in a hole, its heft and hush become a bright nowhere, a soul ramifying and forever silent, beyond silence listened for. I forgot the soul was in that one too. In New York, I suppose one ought to read a poem that has been published in the New Yorker, so I'm delighted to do so. It's called In the Attic, and we have an attic, and the tree was planted so many years ago, and it got to a point where the tree, a birch, not a birch, middle-aged birch at this stage, was waving outside the skylight, and I began to think of it as like a mast moving, and myself as a cabin boy up on this crow's nest, and then I thought of Jim Hawkins in Treasure Island, who was out on a limb towards the end of the book, and Israel Hands is coming up with a pistol. Oh no, I beg your pardon, he's coming up with a knife. And Jim luckily has a pistol, and he uses it. And Hans goes down. I saw a movie of Treasure Island when I was, I suppose, about 9 or 10 years old. I went from my grandfather's house across the way to a showing of it. And when I came in, my grandfather made a mistake that I've remembered ever since. He used the wrong name, but I'll let you hear it in the poem. So there's Jim Hawkins, and there's the attic, and there's the grandfather, and there's the last bit there. In the attic. Like Jim Hawkins, aloft in the cross trees of Hispaniola, nothing underneath him but still green water and clean bottom sand. The ship aground, the canted mast far out, above a seafloor where striped fish pass in shoals. And when they've passed, the face of Israel Hands rose in the shrouds before Jim shot him dead, appears to rise again. But he was dead enough, the story says, being both shot and drowned. A birch tree planted 20 years ago comes between the Irish Sea and me at the attic skylight. A man marooned in his own loft. A boy ship-shaped in the crow's nest of a life, airbrushed to and fro, wind-drunk, braced by all that's thrumming up from keel to masthead, rubbing his eyes to believe them, and this most buoyant, billowy, top-gallant birch. Ghost-footing what was then the terra firma of Holloway linoleum, grandfather now appears, his voice a waver, like the draft-prone screen they'd set up earlier in the club rooms for the matinee I've just come back from. And Isaac Hands, he says, was Isaac in it? His memory of the name a waver too, his mistake perpetual, once and for all, like the single splash when Israel's body fell. As I age and blank on names, as my uncertainty on stairs is more and more the lightheadedness of a cabin boy's first time on the rigging, as the memorable bottoms out into the irretrievable, it's not that I can't still imagine that slight untoward rupture and world tilt as the wind freshened and the anchor weighed. And I think maybe we'll finish off with another kite, a kite for Aibhín. This is the last poem in the book, in the most recent book. This is for, basically a translation that has been appropriated and made hibernicized to some extent. It's an Italian, a wonderful Italian poem called Aquiloni, The Kite, by Giovanni Pascoli, late 19th century, early 20th century writer. But this is for a grandchild. There was a lot of sorrow and elegy in the book, but our grandchild arrived, second grandchild in this case. I have poems for the first grandchild earlier on, but there's a big long one, so we can't. It's kind of a sequence of 12 poems. You don't want that. So this is for number 2, and her name is Aibhín. So this is A Kite for Aibhín, and after Pascoli. Air from another life and time and place, pale blue heavenly air is supporting a white wing beating high against the breeze. And yes, it is a kite. As when one afternoon all of us there trooped out among the briar hedges and stripped thorn, I take my stand again, halt opposite Anahorish Hill to scan the blue, back in that field to launch our long-tailed comet. And now it hovers, tugs, dives, veers askew, lifts itself, goes with the wind, until it rises to loud cheers from us below. Rises, and my hand is like a spindle unspooling. The kite a thin-stemmed flower, climbing and carrying farther, higher, the longing in the breast and planted feet and gazing face and heart of the kite flyer, until string breaks and separate, elate. The kite takes off, itself alone, a windfall. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.